So we'll quickly move to the third case, more or less on the same thing. We'll not pause this case, we'll just run this case. Basically, the point which I wanted to emphasize is one of the commonest things that we have during surgery is breathlessness and hypotension.
Patient clinical details. She is Mrs. Mary, 37-year-old, elderly gravida, second G2A1L0, IBMI, BM of 34, IVF conceived. She is a term pregnant patient, and she is for category 2 cesarean section of breech presentation. Comorbidity, she is diabetic, but well under control with diet only. All yours.
Okay. Hello, Mary. I'm Dr. Malokar, anesthetist. We'll do a cesarean section for you. Anesthesia will be spinal anesthesia. We'll give an injection in your back and you'll be numb from chest below. Is that okay? Okay, doctor. Okay. So I just checked you as a medical chart. Looks like you have no other problems. You had any other medical problems like BP, sugar, thyroid, asthma, anything like that?
No.
Any allergies?
No.
Okay, just open your mouth and show me your tongue. Okay, fine. So let me just make some preparations and then we'll start the surgery. Let's just sign.
So is the patient identified?
Patient is identified. Patient is Mary.
Is the monitor connected, sir?
Monitor is connected. I'm starting the monitor now.
Okay, sir. Is the anesthesia machine connected?
We can check the anesthesia machine. We have all the emergency drugs. Action is ready.
It is okay.
Okay. Emergency airway equipment is ready.
Yes.
Sir, any allergies, sir?
Patient has no allergy.
Any risk of intubation?
Yeah, difficult intubation. Aspiration risk is present.
Okay, no, any estimation of blood loss?
I know, it's like average.
What is the blood group, ma'am?
B positive.
Okay, have you started any antibiotic?
Yeah, we already given injections.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll start the anesthesia now. We'll do spinal anesthesia. Okay, spinal anesthesia is given. Srinath, just put some wedge. Start the IV fluids. Just checking the blood pressure. Put the wedge, sir. Wedge, sir. Okay, fine. Okay, let me just check the blood pressures now.
Can I start, sir?
Yeah, I will start the surgery. So you are feet and right hand now, right? Okay. How are you feeling? You're okay?
Yes, doctor.
Keep giving fluids. You can add some phenylephrine prophylactically. 100 mics phenylephrine to the IV infusion.
100 mics. Phenylephrine going to be added.
Okay.
Phenylephrine is added.
Yeah, okay. Mary, you're feeling okay? You're feeling fine? Yeah. Okay. Fluids are going.
Okay, ma'am, we'll inform in the presentation.
Okay, baby is out. Start use some oxytocin. And 3 units oxytocin you use slowly.
Just give it a
Oxygen is
Just can put the weights down.
Oxygen is given. And it is okay.
We check the blood pressure. Okay, everything looks fine. How is the bleeding?
That's fine, sir. The uterus is nicely retracted.
Okay, some bradycardia I'm seeing. You okay? Huh? Mary, you're feeling fine?
Yes, doctor.
Okay.
Maybe 7.
Oh, just pushing some fluids. Let's give some ephedrine. 6 milligrams ephedrine given. Keep pushing the
Yes, yes.
How are you feeling, Mary? Okay?
Blood on
Let me just
order.
recheck the blood
Yes,
pressure.
doctor.
Okay. Giving the fluids. Liter is more.
Yes, sir. More than.
Okay. Is there any bleeding in the thing?
No, sir. Uterus are intact. Uterus is nicely retracted.
Okay.
Nothing from my side.
Is there any hypertension? Let me just check the level. Can you feel anything here? Mary, can you feel anything here? Just hold my hands properly. Squeeze my hands. Okay, cough little bit. Hypertension processing is tachycardia also. Feel some more effective. Giving another 12 mg effective. Take another IV fluid and push another 500 ml. Yes. Tachycardia. You can see some biogeometry also. You're okay? You're feeling fine? Take another IV cannula. Second IV cannula. Okay, place second IV cannula here. Second IV cannula is here. Just call some Dr. Sunil for additional help. I can't figure out where this hypertension. The blood 1.5 liter. Okay, 1.5 liter fluid has been destroyed. Can you check the urine output?
Yes, sir, it's fine.
Okay, Dr. Manathan, any issues? Maybe you're feeling okay. Any issues? She's having persistent hypertension and tachycardia, hygiene. How much pressure pressures are gone in? So given phenylephrine 100 ml, I've also started phenylephrine infusion. Then given almost 30 mg of ephedrine intermittently. Given more than 100 is okay. Yeah, level is fine. Can you just cough? Mary, can you cough? Can you just hold my finger tightly? Okay. Are you feeling this? Are you feeling this pressing sensation on your chest wall? Can you feel it? Yes. Yeah, just start the non-adrenaline infusion. Yes, sir. Start 6-7 per hour. Any sepsis is there, Dr. Vidya?
No, sir. there's
Already started?
There's no fear.
She is obese, she is diabetic. Are we missing any heart disease complicating pregnancy?
No, sir, she was okay on the examination.
Okay. I think anyways, baby is okay, no, doctor?
Yes, sir, baby's that is good.
Upper is good. Any no bleeding from your side?
No, sir.
So there is no hemorrhage, unlikely to be sepsis, oxygen hypertension. I think we are missing something. Anyway, let us shift her to ICU. Just Shrina, yes, inform ICU that we may have to keep her there. Okay. And also call the family members. Sure. We may have to counsel. Okay. She needs a workup. You can call the intensivist. Probably we may have to do very. Or are there any murmurs or anything? Or anything? No, I didn't hear anything in the video. You to lose it elevated. Restrict fluids. Don't push it fluids. Yes, some restriction. Give 20 milligrams of Lasix. Furosemide give 20 milligrams of furosemide. Some slight basal correction. Yeah, I think just restrict fluids. Just inform the attendants. We may have to put a central analysis line also. In the monitoring is shifted to ICU after surgery. Okay, surgery is over, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Can we get a good time out and sign out and then transfer to ICU? Yeah, so sign out from anesthesia perspective, she's having persistent hypertension, so we are shifting her to the ICU for further workup. And antibiotics will continue. We may even have to step up the antibiotics depending upon the finding. And from obstetrics side, any concerns?
No, sir. We'll check it.
Can we put the baby on the mother's bed once she stabilizes?
Definitely, sir. Baby therapy.
Okay. So let us call the family members. Will counsel them.
Okay, sir.
So I don't want to again pause the things that I wanted to highlight by doing this case is hypotension, breathlessness are quite common that we encounter in routine day-to-day practices. And unless you have a clear-cut algorithmic approach, like in the first case, we went on giving fluids because sepsis was one of the cause that was quite apparent. WBC count was elevated. She was having PP, ROM, and then she was having she looked warm and all these things. So fluid resuscitation was of paramount importance. Lactates were high in the neonate. And in second case, she developed crepitations. That means there is something sinister going on. Have we missed anything? So this case, basically all these cases that we are discussed today so far have been real life cases that we have encountered. The first case was, of course, happened just last week. If Manokant agrees, yes, it was last week that we encountered. And the second and third case again have been in the past. The second case was hypotension with sepsis, and third case turned out to be peripartum cardiomyopathy. If you see the ventricular biogeminy, WPW-like pattern on the ECG, some underlying conduction defect is there. Whenever you have arrhythmias not explainable by electrolytes and other things, cardiac disease is very thing have to be ruled out at any cost. So doing an echo, have a low threshold to do an echo at 12 ECG, at least it will give a lot of information. And importantly, hypotension does not mean that you have to keep on pushing fluids. Very, very important. So titration of vasopressors, titration of fluid, have a good differential diagnosis is of paramount importance. Anything you want to add, other panelists? No? Archana, Madam, Akhila, Aruna.
Like I was saying, echocardiography is very, very important,
Yes.
especially in the setting of preeclampsia. We've had a lot of patients who actually had a cardiomyopathy, peripartum
Yes.
cardiomyopathy. So echocardiography is one thing which will help us.
Yes. So have a low threshold for an echo. In fact, now most of us, like our colleagues, have started doing echo. At least what we know, the contractility and ejection fraction can be made out by most of our colleagues. And of course, cardiologists can definitely add and do a more detailed echo.
Sir, it would also help us, it would guide us in the co-loading also, how much fluid we can give and when to stop and then when to add a diuretic.
Yes.
The echo would that way also be very helpful.
Yes, madam.
The one more thing, Dr. Sunil, we've had a couple of patients who also had stress cardiomyopathy post-cesarean. We've had
Yes.
encountered those also.
Talk about
Cardiomyopathy, yes.
Yes. Manakant, you want to add anything in this case? Again, whenever spinal hypertension, always wrote anesthetic cause high spinal. In this case, the level again was reassessed.
Yeah, I think it's basically the importance of bedside 2D echo as an important tool for ruling out other causes and coming to a proper diagnosis. So
Yes.
there are not many questions. Shall we go to the next scenario?
Before we go, there are few cases from the first case scenario. One gentleman had asked, use rocuronium.
Yes. I mean, they are not able to see the answers you said, correct. Someone has asked whether, is it okay to use succinylcholine because won't it increase the intragastric pressure?
Yeah.
Is it safe for the baby?
Yeah.
So succinylcholine is the drug of choice, which is used for a rapid sequence induction and intubation and obstetrics. The alternative drug which we have is rocuronium. But if you're going to have a difficult airway scenario, you're stuck with rocuronium because if you don't have Sucamadex, it's giving a long-acting muscle relaxants in a difficult airway scenario. So succinylcholine is the drug of choice. The increase in intragastric pressure is not significant enough to cause regurgitation and aspiration. So it is not contraindicated and it is safe for the baby. It can be used.
I must tell you that the routine drug for intubation in pregnancy is succinylcholine, unless there is hyperkalemia or acute kidney injury with where succinylcholine is contraindicated. And generally, if you see the scenarios, when do we give general anesthesia to the patient, pregnant patient for cesarean section? One is when region is contraindicated or when the patient refuses. And when the region is contraindicated, the commonest scenario is coagulopathy. And one of the commonest cause of coagulopathy is preeclampsia related pathology. So again, when you have this preeclampsia related pathology, they may be having deranged LFTs, deranged RFTs, and all these things. And rocuronium with deranged liver and renal function may not recover for a few hours. We had to ventilate patients for almost 6 to 8 hours following rocuronium single dose. So rocuronium and the intubation conditions with succinylcholine cannot be compared with what you get with rocuronium. Choline is much superior compared to rocuronium. So only indication for using rocuronium is when choline is contraindicated, like hyperkalemia. Otherwise, go for succinylcholine. Or when you have arrhythmias or anything that can get aggravated with succinylcholine. So we'll move on to the next scenario.
Yes.
Yes.
So we move to the next scenario.
Yeah.
Manokant and Archana, madam.
Yeah, sir, you can play the video.
I'll play the video, yes.
Yeah, this lady is Mrs. Mary, 27-year-old, primary gravida, term parturient, BM of 37, 39 weeks of gestational age. She set into spontaneous labor at around almost 6 hours back. She was 3 centimeters dilated. She was given epidural on maternal request because of high VAS, which was 8 on 10. Epidural was cited almost about 6 hours ago. She received 4 top-ups. She seemed to be fairly comfortable. The optician feels there's a presumed fatal compromise and she has been shifted for cesarean section category 2 because of presumed fatal compromise.
Mary, I'm Dr. Manokant, anesthetist. How is your epidural working so far? Okay, you're having good pain relief. So we can use the same epidural catheter for cesarean anesthesia also.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do the signing.
Is the patient identified?
Patient is identified, Mary.
Okay. Is the monitors connected?
Monitors connected. I'm switching them on now. Anesthesia workstation. Srinath, did you check everything? Okay, circuit is good. Structure is ready. We have airway equipment.
Yes.
Emergency drugs.
Yes.
Okay, you're good.
Any allergies, sir?
She has no allergies. I've gone through her case sheet. She's ASA1
Okay,
patient.
sir, any risk for intubation?
She has a difficult airway. We have a difficult airway card with us.
Any risk for respiration, sir?
She has aspiration risk. We have already given antacid prophylaxis.
Okay. Ma'am, is there any risk for blood loss?
Yeah, we have to wait and see.
Okay, blood
But
loss.
yeah, first.
Is we started any antibiotics as per the protocol?
Yeah, injection is started.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we'll just give some medication through your epidural catheter and you will be numb from your chest below, okay?
Okay.
Okay, let me just give some buprenorphine for her. Okay, I'll mix some fentanyl also, okay? So, I'm giving her 100 mics fentanyl and total about 20 ml of 0.5% buprenorphine.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Narmada, gynecologist.
Yeah, I can do the timeout now.
Now to do cesarean section for this patient.
Okay, put the wedge, Srinath. Yeah.
The medication is treated.
This is placed. Okay, okay. You're okay, what happened? You're feeling, let me just check the blood pressure again.
I started.
You didn't have start, okay? Now, giddiness, just, you have, you're okay now? I'm not right. What is happening to you? Oh, no, tingling and giddiness, maybe local anesthesia also. You bring over the baby is very good. So, looks like she's ready to Okay. Now we'll incubate. Okay. Madam, you just finish the surgery. This is the uterus, right? Is the uterus okay? Okay, she's having some arrhythmias also, I think from local anesthetic oxygen. Just take the this thing, call for help and start the intraliquid.
Yeah, uterus is well retracted.
Okay, we are ready for the intraliquid. I gave her a B-type. Intraliquid started. Okay. Load some amiodarone. 150 mg amiodarone. Give 1 liter intraliquid fast. Yeah. Give amiodarone. Yes. Yeah. Okay, let me just check the blood pressure again. But it seems to be okay. What is the uterus? When is that?
Now the uterus
What is the BP, doctor?
observed low, 6 and 7.
Can we put an RTL line of the even blood gas, which may be having metabolic acidosis? Whether it is for get one more pendulum, we have to put on the venous canal of this.
Okay, I can update.
Give 1 liter of fluid fast. Start non-admitted, start non-admitted infusion.
Okay, we are having sinuses of back.
Okay, see, already started. Yeah. Look, is it, was there any blood you finished the surgery, madam?
Yes.
There is no bleeding, right?
No bleeding.
Okay.
Was there any
Sounds
blood?
somehow.
I think it has gone catheter is migrated in the venous compartment. Blind blood is coming.
Okay.
I think it looks like lost.
Okay. Yeah. His symptoms are actually very typical. Last
But it is settled on it, but she needs to be electrically ventilated. Luckily, the intralipid, give one more bottle of intralipid, yes. Yeah, one more bottle started. Call the family, will have to consult them, and she will require actuation, we overall actuation, observation. Total, how much you have done again?
20 ml, 0.5%.
Okay. Seems to be settling down, but anyway, we have to be watchful.
Doctor, lactate levels are high for baby.
I think should come down. It looks like a local systemic toxicity should settle down. I think. But I think anyway, baby needs to be monitored because bupivacaine being they may have little high hyperbutyria. We just have to wait and watch.
Thank you.
I think we'll just do a timeout and shift the patient to the ICU. We'll just see. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Timeout.
So from anesthesia point, I think she had local anesthetic toxicity, which took her to the ICU, ventilated. And antibiotics will continue. Any concerns from the hospital side?
No, this is been detected.
So we'll debrief the family and
Yeah.
and intralipid infusion, it is all good.
The intelligent is what helped her around.
So, basically, can we? So the things that I wanted to emphasize in this video are basically. Do you want? Shall we run the video and or do it together?
What do others opine? I think we can just continue discussion.
Yeah.
Aruna,
Okay.
shall we run the video again and then do debriefing?
However, Dr. Manokar, it's his call.
I
Okay.
think
So what?
we'll do the debriefing. We'll just run the video for a shorter and then. Did you need
Can I have a?
Yeah, this lady is Mrs. Mary, 27-year-old, driving gravida, term parturient, BMI of 37, 39 weeks of gestational age. She set into spontaneous labor at around almost 6 hours back. She was 3 centimeters dilated. She was given epidural on maternal request because of high bars, which was 8 on 10. Epidural was cited almost for 6 hours ago. She received 4 top-ups. She seemed to be fairly comfortable. The obstetrician feels there is a presumed fatal compromise and she has been shifted for cesarean section category 2 because of presumed fatal compromise.
Mary, I'm Dr. Manokar, anesthetist. How is your epidural working so far? Okay, you are having good pain relief. So we can use the same epidural catheter for cesarean anesthesia also.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do the signing.
Patient ID.
So basically, if you look at the history, yes, she is a case where epidural was cited on maternal request at 3 centimeters dilatation. 4 top-ups were given, good pain relief. Anything else you would like to do at this juncture?
So, so as you have noticed, well, the anesthetist asked the history briefly, and then he asked whether the catheter was working well, and then he proceeded to give the epidural bolus to convert it to cesarean section. So, do you think? So the things that probably should have been done were a few more steps, like checking the level of the block before starting, so that because she's coming from labor room, she already had 4 top-ups for labor analgesia. There may be some residual level. That's one thing that must be checked. And the second thing is position of the catheter. So ideally, before the patient is lying flat or supine on the OT table, when they are shifting onto the OT table, check the catheter position so that the catheter is in place. Otherwise, you may realize that the catheter is out after giving the bolus and after everybody is draped and ready to go. So that's the one thing. The second thing is there any role for test dose in this scenario? So again, there are many schools of thought when it comes to test dose. So in this scenario, actually, because the patient has already received a few top-ups in the labor ward, um, if you are using test dose, you can use lignocaine with adrenaline, but again you should make sure that you are using it between the uterine contractions, because if you give it along with uterine contractions, the tachycardia from uterine contractions may mask the tachycardia from adrenaline that's in the test dose. Secondly, the to identify whether the catheter is in the intrathecal space or not, again test dose, if you are using lignocaine as test dose, then probably you will get it will take about 3 to 4 minutes time to get a motor blockade. But if you are using bupivacaine for testing the catheter, then it will take much longer, and to get because with about 3 to 4 milligrams of bupivacaine you won't get any motor block, so that is not useful. Thirdly, if you are aspirating and if there is most of the times if you see blood or CSF, that is confirmed. Otherwise, there is a small risk of false negative aspiration also. So having said this, test dose is there are schools of thought, people who stick to test dose, people who don't use test dose. Whatever you are using it, like Dr. Sunil said in one of the earlier scenarios, every top up should be treated as a test dose, and it should be given in small ml boluses and slowly over a certain period of time. So don't rush to give a large bolus in one shot. So that's the recipe for trouble. Whether you give test dose or not, give smaller boluses and taking longer time to avoid any problem. So these two things. Next, I think we can restart the video and see what.
One other thing, again, I want to reiterate the point that the checking of epidural catheter is mandatory. Whenever the patient who is laboring parturient has an epidural and when they come for cesarean section, remove the plaster, check the epidural catheter, because many a times the epidural catheter migrates out or migrates in, and you end up giving a top up in a migrated catheter, or it may not be working. So checking the catheter is mandatory. Yeah, I'll run the scenario further.
Patient is identified, Mary.
Okay. Is the monitors connected?
Monitors connected. I'm switching them on now. Anesthesia workstation. Srinath, did you check everything? Okay, circuit is good. Akshay is ready. We have airway equipment. Yes. Emergency drugs. Yes. Okay, very good.
Any allergies, sir?
She has no allergies. I've gone through her case sheet. She's ASA1 patient.
So any risk for intubation?
She has a difficult airway. We have a airway card with us.
Any risk for respiration, sir?
She has aspiration risk. We have already given antacid prophylaxis.
Okay. Ma'am, is there any risk for blood loss?
Yeah, we have to wait and see.
Okay, blood loss, ma'am?
A first.
Is we started any antibiotics as per the protocol?
Injection
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we just give some medication through your epidural catheter and you will be numb from your chest below, okay?
Okay.
Okay, let me just give some bupivacaine for her. Okay, I'll mix some fentanyl also, okay? So,
Again, I would like to ask Manokang, why did you choose bupivacaine?
Yeah, so that's a good question.
Because it's a workshop and simulation, or it's a protocol?
So that's a good question. So at this point, actually, I'm interested to know what the audience would choose as their preferred local anesthetic. So normally we use 2% lignocaine with adrenaline to convert labor analgesia to cesarean section analgesia. There are many advantages in using lignocaine with adrenaline. So one thing is the onset is much quicker. So there are many meta-analysis which has shown if you use lignocaine with adrenaline and add soda bicarb to that, so every 10 cc's you add 1 cc of soda bicarb, the onset of action can be as quick as 3 to 5 minutes, especially if the nerves are if the patient is coming from labor analgesia, because there is already some amount of blockade from the local anesthetic that is being used for labor analgesia. then bupivacaine takes much longer time to act, bupivacaine or ropivacaine, and you may have to use larger doses. And also, when there is a local anesthetic toxicity like scenario, reversing lignocaine toxicity is much easier or than reversing a bupivacaine or ropivacaine toxicity. So the preference is lignocaine with adrenaline. The other local anesthetic that can be used is 3% 2-chlorprocaine. So one great advantage with chlorprocaine is it is metabolized by cholinesterases. And the onset is rapid, just like adrenaline. You can add soda bicarb and opioid. So the usually used local anesthetic is lignocaine with adrenaline, along with about 80 to 100 mics of fentanyl, or chlorprocaine if it is available, 3% chlorprocaine with fentanyl. You can add soda bicarb to both and bolus. The onset is very rapid. With chlorprocaine added advantages, local anesthetic toxicity is extremely rare because in 15 to 20 minutes, the drug action vanishes. One thing you have to remember if you are using chlorprocaine is remember to top it up with lignocaine and with adrenaline after about 10-15 minutes. The onset is quicker. The regression is also very rapid with chlorprocaine. So you have to bolus lignocaine top it up with lignocaine with adrenaline to prolong the anesthesia. So that's the choice so bupivacaine is not the drug of choice when it comes to converting cesarean section, converting labor analgesia to C-section.
Akila and Aruna, your comments?
The same thing. We use lignocaine with adrenaline, especially because when you've given a labor epidural and then they've come to theatre for section, is usually for an emergency cesarean, and everyone is in a drastic state to get it started. So the common drug which we use is lignocaine with adrenaline to get going. It's very unusual to use bupivacaine. So I would like to, Manokant chose to create the toxicity, is it here?
Absolutely, yes. The thing is, our protocol is 8 plus 1 plus 1, 8 plus 1 plus 1. 8 ml of lignocaine with adrenaline, 1 ml of fentanyl, 1 ml of bicarb. Just that mix 10 ml, and then subsequently we load another 10 ml and give incrementally. And believe me, so far, last I've seen, I don't know when I saw last.
When was the last?
It is very rare. It is very, very rare. It is very rare. Second thing is, it is always easier to treat lignocaine toxicity compared to bupivacaine toxicity. And second thing, 2% lignocaine gives a better muscle relaxation compared to 0.5%.
That's another very important thing.
Yeah.
I mean, even for any other surgeries, the relaxation which you get with lignocaine, epidurally, you will not get it with bupivacaine.
Yeah. So a lot of advantages, and many a time some of the colleagues are under the impression that if the patient has mitral stenosis or heart disease, lignocaine with adrenaline is contraindicated because adrenaline can cause tachycardia. No, the amount of, suppose if the epidural is in right place, right compartment, hardly it causes significant tachycardia. So even in patients with cardiovascular diseases, 2% lignocaine with adrenaline is a safe drug and a safe bet. So bupivacaine, I would say, should be condemned in obstetrics, surgical epidurals. Yes, labor epidurals fine, drug of choice, but for surgical epidurals should not be used.
There's one more thing about epidural I wanted to bring out, Dr. Sunil. Many times when you aspirate the epidural for blood, you might not get it because it's going to collapse. So sometimes if you just leave them open, the blood will just trickle out. So just because you aspirate and you don't get blood doesn't mean that it is not intravascular.
100%.
Yeah, leaving the catheter to gravity, if the blood comes, that's a better way of checking. Yeah.
Yes, it's just the point for the benefit of the delegates.
Other thing is, even though you're aspirating, better to use a 2 ml syringe rather than 10 ml syringe.
Yes.
The amount of negative pressure you create with 10 ml syringe is much more, and it's a thin Batson plexus, it just collapses.
Yes, it's
So
very important.
just have to use a 2 ml syringe, or just leave, as you said rightly, leave it to gravity, and if it is in the blood vessel, it just comes out. Yeah.
Sir, if I may interrupt, Dr. Manokant has very nicely presented the shortcomings in the video. And then first thing was that since it's a category 2 cesarean section, we did get some time to give a test dose, and then we check whether the epidural is functioning or not. because since you have already said that it could be blocked at any point of time. And then we might, even if we try to aspirate, we might not be getting blood in the catheter. Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah, go ahead, madam.
Okay. And then also when we prepared the case and brought the patient, everything was looked into, including the airway devices. But I think the airway assessment had already been done and her fasting status. And because she was on epidural and then in labor, hopefully her prophylaxis for aspiration was also being given. That part, maybe we in the video it could have been covered.
Yeah, it's a protocol that every patient who walks into the theater or wheels into the theater, they receive either IV if it's emergency or oral if it's elective. It is 100% mandatory. We don't miss out. It is 100% compliance on this in our hospital. Like prophylactic antibiotic, almost 98% compliance. So antacid prophylaxis is 100% compliance. There's no escape from this.
So if we go, we carry this scenario forward to in any other hospital,
yeah,
for every hospital,
yes,
for that matter.
So I'll just continue further.
I'm giving her
No.
100 mics ventilators and total about 20 ml of 0.5% bupivacaine.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Narmada, gynecologist.
Yeah, we can do the timeout now.
To do cesarean section for this patient.
Okay, put the wedge, Srina.
The indication
Yeah,
is treated
wedge is placed. Okay, okay. You're okay, what happened? You're feeling, let me just check the blood pressure again.
I started.
Give it a back start, okay? Giddiness, just, you're okay now? What is happening to you? What are you? Tingling and weakness? Are you having any local you breathing very well. So, looks like she's ready.
Yeah, let us stop this. Manokant, why did you choose propofol?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Actually, I wanted you have noticed that the anesthetist there immediately he saw the patient was seizing, and she complained of perioral numbness and giddiness and restlessness, and then she started throwing fit. The anesthetist picked up the closed circuit to give 100% oxygen, and then instructed his colleague technician or colleague to give propofol and scoline, and went ahead intubating. So that could be a problem if you do it so rapidly in a real situation, because propofol, after bupivacaine toxicity, they'll have arrhythmias and hypotension, and if you give propofol in addition to that, they can have a cardiovascular collapse. So the first thing that you have to do immediately after seizure is ABCs, and try to arrest the seizure by using a benzodiazepine. So probably benzodiazepine is the drug of choice to arrest a seizure. So you can choose to give midazolam, about 2 milligrams or even 5 milligrams, and focus on maintaining the airway patent instead of just rushing to intubate. So you can use airway, hold bag and mask, and use suction, and try to keep the patent airway patent, and then control the seizures. Once things are under control, you can decide about how you want to intubate the patient.
Yeah.
See, yeah.
The point that the take home point for the delegates is, if you look at the CC-CNS ratio of bupivacaine, the moment you have neurotoxicity, imminent cardiovascular collapse is there. So post seizure, the next step, within few seconds of few minutes, you'll see a cardiovascular collapse. And if you give propofol or thiopentone, you're inducing cardiac arrest. So whenever you have a seizure following bupivacaine toxicity, do not use propofol or thiopentone. You may induce cardiac arrest. Rather than that, you can use straight away. You can go for dexamethasone with the midazolam or any other benzodiazepine, but not to use this profound vasodilators because that can induce cardiac arrest. Very, very important, and it can also induce arrhythmias.
Sir, can I give my,
Madam, बोलिए madam.
can I give my take on with a small slide presentation with your permissions?
Yes, yeah, we'll just finish this and then we can do this, madam.
We'll do it in the end, madam, as a closing remark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now we'll intubate. Okay. Madam, we just finish the surgery. This is the uterus.
Yes.
Is the uterus okay? She's having some arrhythmias or I think from local anesthetic. Just take the this thing, call for help and start the intralepic.
Yeah, uterus is well retracted.
Okay, we are ready for the intralepic. I gave her a 20 beta. Intralepic started. Okay. I wrote some amiodarone also. 150 mg amiodarone. Give 1 liter intralepic fast. Yeah. Give amiodarone. Yes. Yeah. So let me just take the method again. It seems to be okay. What is the uterus? When is that?
Now the uterus
What is the baby doctor?
after it low, 6 and 7.
Can you put an RTL line of the even pregnant, which may be a metabolic acidosis? Get one more vein, pendulum, we have to put one more venous canal of this. Okay, I can update. Give 1 liter of fluid fast. Start now as iron. Start now as infusion. Okay, we are having sinus in the back. Okay, see, already started. Yeah. Look, was there any blood you finished the surgery, madam?
Yes.
There is no bleeding, right?
No bleeding.
Okay. Was there any
Some
I didn't realize that there is blood. I think it is gone like catheter is negative in the venous compartment. Trying blood is coming. Okay. I think it looks like lost. Okay. Yeah. His symptoms are actually very typical of last but settle on a but she needs to be electrically ventilated. Luckily the intra give one more bottle of intra.
So if you look at the sequence patient when you VTAC, you want to give amiodarone or defibrillator, Manoj? I mean Manokant.
So in this case, because that's a good question. So amiodarone or defib. So that depends upon her pulse. If there is still pulse, if she is not yet in cardiac arrest, then we can proceed with medical management by giving amiodarone. But probably the common tendency or in that whole rush, we may pick up lignocaine and give IV lignocaine to control ventricular arrhythmias. That's again not advisable because the reason for ventricular arrhythmias is local anesthetic toxicity. So if you give for the more local anesthetic to control that, that's not going to help. So the choice of antiarrhythmic is amiodarone. Of course, if the patient has a cardiac arrest, there is no pulse, then you quickly start off the ACLS algorithm, give shock, and then you have to the one thing that you have to remember in ACLS algorithm for this thing local anesthetic toxicity is reduce the dose of adrenaline. So normally you would push 1 milligram of adrenaline, but here you have to give less than 1 mic per kg. So probably 50 to 70 mics adrenaline boluses you have to give instead of 1 milligram bolus, and then do the regular CPR. Then if for shockable rhythms, give shock and give amiodarone.
Yeah. Akila?
Yeah, Manokant has told everything. Only thing is, just to add upon, if the patient goes into arrest, a good ACLS and chest compressions, no vigorous CPR is going to bring back your patient to normalcy, because with time, effective CPR, there will be dissociation of your local anesthetic from the cardiac muscle. So it's a totally a reversible condition. So we should never let go patients. The CPR should be most effective. That is what we should have in mind, especially when we are treating with local LAST. We do not have lipid emulsion, I know. So every theater might not have it. So in case of arrest, I think ACLS should be done vigorously following all the protocols. That is the success for the treatment of LAST, I would say.
There have been instances where CPR was done for more than 3 to 4 hours and successful outcome. There have been few instances where last patient was put on cardiopulmonary bypass and patients have come out. So last requires aggressive treatment for a longer time. Eventually, if the treatment is aggressive, eventually they come out. Yes. Manokant?
Yeah. So the other thing, like you have rightly mentioned, if cardiopulmonary bypass is available, the CPR cardiopulmonary bypass team should be notified to make quick arrangements. So other than this, when we have to talk about the dose of intralipid that was given. So now recently, previously the algorithm, the ASRA came up with a algorithm where they used to mention milligrams per minute dose, which was becoming difficult to calculate in a acute scenario. So now they have come up with weights. If the patient is more than 70 kgs, you straight away give about 100 ml of intralipid. If they are less than 70 kgs, then you probably have to give 1.5. That's about 70 ml. So this should be given over 2 to 3 minutes. And if there is still hemodynamic instability, you continue half the dose or about 0.25 to 0.5 ml per minute for another 15 to 20 minutes. Or if they are still hemodynamically unstable, you have to repeat the dose or double the dose and repeat it. Maximum dose that you can give is about 10 ml per minute. That is roughly about 10 ml per kg. So that's about 500 to 700 ml in half an hour.
So intralipid should be there in all the units where you practice epidural and regional anesthesia, blocks or epidural, because that is one of the antidote for LAST and especially aminoamides, local anesthetic like bupivacaine and ropivacaine. It has to be there in every unit where you practice epidural analgesia. There is one question from the audience. What is the role of adrenaline in LAST? Already you have covered, but if you can just elaborate further again, Manokant.
So normally in a cardiac arrest scenario, you would give 1 mg adrenaline every 3 to 5 minutes. But if the cardiac arrest is secondary to a local anesthetic toxicity, you should remember to reduce your adrenaline dosage to about 1 mic per kg. That's about 70. If it is a 70 kg woman, about 70 mics boluses. So that's one thing. So it is better to dilute it into 1 in 10,000 and give roughly about 1 cc bolus. That is about 100 mic boluses maximum.
There is one more question. If you are using diglocaine or bupivacaine, how long patient should be under observation once the patient is stabilized after LAST?
So there is again the guideline also mentions how long you have to monitor them. So minimum monitoring is for about 2 hours. If they are unstable, then you may have to extend the monitoring up to 6 hours or maybe even 24 hours. If they are requiring any inotrope supports or like, So it's not about bupivacaine, it's about their hemodynamic stability. So minimum monitoring is 2 hours, then maximum is 6 to 24 hours.
Madam, you had a PPT to share, right? You can share the PPT.
So you can switch on the PPT and click on the share screen. Archana madam.
Archana madam. Dr. Archana. She's gone on pause mode, I think. Akira, you want to add anything to what we have discussed, Manokant has discussed?
I think we've covered very well. I'm just going through the chat box to see if we've answered all the
There's one more question for like, should pre-op 2D echo screen be made mandatory for all pre-eclampsia patients
Yes,
in
yes,
ninth month?
yes, yeah.
If given a choice, yes. I think we have a debate during the conference about pre-op echo. I request this gentleman or lady to please attend the conference, and we'll have a consensus at least during the conference. But you can give your opinion, Akila and Aruna.
I think given a choice, we would like to have them an echocardiogram, baseline echocardiogram, especially in pre-eclamptic patients. That will give you a rough idea about the left ventricular status and the ejection fraction, I suppose. We would. I hope Aruna would agree.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anything which is going to give us more information about what's going on, I think it is valuable so that we can titrate our management accordingly. Especially with the increased risk of peripartum cardiomyopathy in preeclampsia, I think it's essential to get an echo done. The only thing is the feasibility of getting it done. I think more, as you, Dr. Sunil pointed out, more and more anesthetists are becoming very, good in echo. And probably it's only a matter of time before we'll do the echo ourselves and then ship them into the theater for the cesarean anesthesia.
Already that trend has started in Australia.
Probably it'll come to India then soon.
Yeah, I think Archana had some PowerPoint she was telling.
Yeah, I think, but she looks like she got disconnected.
Yeah, she's not there. I think she's got disconnected.
Net-
Do you have the backup of the PowerPoint, Dr. Malakant?
No, I don't have, but I just want to share the the algorithm.
Yeah,
So
please.
I'll just download it. So yeah, she has entered. We can ask Dr. Archana to present.
Madam, you wanted to share one PowerPoint, no?
Dr. Archana.
Sir, I'm there. My connection got disrupted in between.
Yeah, please.
Epidural anesthesia in the parturient is a boon, as we all agree today. Though there was it was mired in lots of controversy, like it prolonged labor, or the chances or incidence of instrumental delivery were more. Now it has been mitigated with the use of mixtures of low dose of anesthetics and opioids. And also it is up to us to maximize this procedure with safe and appropriate use of these drugs. And the best practice guidelines report the conversion of epidural anesthesia to surgical anesthesia and GA with an incidence of less than 3%. And labor epidural top-up can fail, and the incidence may go up to 21%. And then the big thing that we are very scared of with the use of huge dose of local anesthetic in epidural is the incidence of LAST, which can happen either if we give accidental IV injection of a large dose, or the systemic absorption of the local anesthetic makes a huge dose of local anesthetic available in the body. And in the CNS, it causes an imbalance between the excitatory and inhibitory pathway, and in the CVS, it causes conduction block through the sodium, potassium, and calcium channels. So why are we so scared of LAST, especially in epidural, labor epidural? So as we probably all of us know that the epidural veins get distended, and so the incidence of catheter migration is more, then increased cardiac output and vascularity. The low level of alpha-1 acid glycoprotein makes free local anesthetic concentration more in the parturient, and there may be reduced clearance of local anesthetic, and also the pregnancy hormones may cause the cardiac cells to be more prone to arrhythmia. And then the pathophysiology of the pregnancy complicates cardiac arrest in the parturient. Also, the other considerations that we must take are the type of local anesthetic, as sir has been repeatedly saying about bupivacaine and use of lignocaine, and single versus continuous drug that is given in the epidural catheter. Also, certain comorbidities which decrease the clearance of the drugs. Then, since it is very common for the elderly parturient and then sometimes small size patient, and then if it is a prolonged labor, then acidosis may come in, though not in a tertiary level hospital, but maybe if the patient is having a long labor duration, then acidosis may intervene. And also, since it is inherent that in epidural space, the absorption of local anesthetic is high, second only to the intercostal space. So local anesthetic systemic toxicity is a totally preventable condition, and then we must be very looking for any signs of last while we are injecting, and we must be very much aware of it, and this management plan should be very clear. So while giving epidural analgesia, we must administer it in a setting where the equipments for resuscitation and is there available, and then patient care monitors are fitted into the patient. Then there is a facility for administering oxygen and airway rescue devices there. Then IV line, as this is minimum, this is already done, and drugs are given according to the ACLS guidelines, including and intralipid should always be available in whatever kind of setting that we are giving regional blocks and labor analgesics. Even if that much of drug is wasted, then it is good luck that we did not have to use it. And in the OT, we should, when we top up our labor epidural, it is very important to do frequent aspiration, then give incremental dose, small doses, and wait, and then give a test dose, and addition of a tracer like epinephrine. And when we anticipate difficult insertion of a catheter, we must use ultrasound, and ultrasonography should be used liberally, and just to screen the back, so that when comes who needs previous screening with an ultrasonography, we are quite aware of what we have to see. Then migration of it is very important to remember that migration of an existing catheter can occur at any age, and aspiration may also fail to detect it at times. But when we see that in a epidural catheter, the pain, breakthrough pain keeps occurring, and repeated top-ups are necessary, and then there is unilateral block or patchy block, we must always bear in mind that the catheter migration has occurred. It may be in the epidural space, or it may even have entered a blood vessel. So at the first onset of, if it has got intravenous or into vascular space, then initially it starts with perioral numbness, metallic taste, dizziness, difficulty in speech, and tinnitus. which gradually progresses to somnolence, seizure, respiratory insufficiency, and if not dealt with, then the patient may land up with coma and deaths. And sometimes all these features happen at very close succession when the dose is high, so that we have very little time to deal with it. Cardiovascular symptoms are widening of QRS complexes, ventricular tachycardia or bradycardia, ventricular fibrillation, and asystole. And when we manage last, if it happens during the process of injection, we stop injecting immediately, then immediately call for help, and then ABC, airway, breathing, and circulation. We start with compression, taking in, remembering to give a left tilt to the uterus, and then to stop the seizure with benzodiazepine, or then start with intralipid emulsion at the earlier sign of last. Then follow ACLS protocol with certain KVAs. Then epinephrine is the drug of choice, but its dose is a little less than 1 microgram per kg. No systemic vasoconstrictors are to be used, as there is already cardiovascular depression. No beta blocker or calcium channel blockers are to be used. Amiodarone is the antiarrhythmic of choice. Intralipid therapy with 20% intralipid. Maximum dose is 10 ml per kg within 30 minutes, and continue intralipid till 10 minutes of hemodynamic stability. And how long to monitor depends on the severity of symptoms and comorbidities. If it is neurological symptoms, then it is 2 hours after recovery. And if there was cardiovascular symptoms, it is 6 hours after recovery. Last is rare, but may be fatal. Prevention is paramount. Early recognition and intralipid infusion may prevent cardiovascular toxicity. And last kit should be immediately available in all the centers which practice regional anesthesia and epidurals, labor epidurals. This is the ASRA guidelines that has been given for local anesthetic systemic toxicity checklist, and this is the algorithm that we are supposed to follow. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
Yeah, so this algorithm has been developed recently after a few simulation scenarios where they found that following this flowchart is much easier than the earlier algorithm, which was point-wise. So having this algorithm in the OR, and by the what they mean by local anesthetic toxicity kit is basically having IV fluids, few syringes, and the intralipid packed together in a bag, so that you immediately open the bag and start giving it. Any questions?
Many a times this one of the common thing is intralipid is expensive and it has a limited shelf life of 1 year. I must tell you that most of the hospital where they do lots of epidurals, it's a multidisciplinary unit, and you can always use this as a nutrition 3 months, 4 months before expiry. So it never goes waste. Intralipid is a resourceful, I would say, infusion, and it should always be stored. And it cannot be, you cannot compromise on that. And whenever there is a nearing expiry, like 3 to 4 months short of expiry, you can always transfer this bottle to the ICU, and it can be used as a nutrition support for the sick patient. But see that it is always available. Yes.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat box. So is epidural safe option in known cardiac disease in pregnancy like valvular heart disease? So yeah, epidural, slowly topping up the epidural for patients with valvular heart disease is the choice of anesthetic. These days, the low dose spinal with epidural is gaining more popularity. You can go as low as maybe 5 to 6 milligrams of bupivacaine spinal hyperbaric. That will give you some initial surgical anesthesia, then slowly bolus it as per the level of block with an epidural. In this case, so 5 to 6 milligram of intrathecal hyperbaric bupivacaine will be very hemodynamically stable, and that will also give you surgical anesthesia for initial few minutes. Once the baby is delivered or once you notice that the level is decreasing, you can slowly bolus the epidural. That's one way of doing it. The other way is just slowly bolus, take your time, 25 to 30 minutes, slowly bolus the epidural catheter. Next question is if the effect of top up on.
Dr. Manokant, I just wanted to add one thing on that. Like how Dr. Manokant pointed out, there is no contraindication. The only exceptions will be if a patient is in NYHA class 3 and 4, like if severe mitral stenosis where patient is in pulmonary edema, or if the patient is on anticoagulants, like atrial fibrillation with thrombosis, or if not for those two contraindications, there is no contraindication for an epidural.
In fact, if you ask me, one thumb rule that we follow in our hospital is except severe pulmonary hypertension, any cardiac ailment is a classic indication for putting an epidural either for labor or a graded epidural for cesarean section, because the hemodynamic stability it confers is the best, provided the person who is at the head end is an experienced person. So if you're good with GA, then don't try an epidural if you're a novice. So epidural definitely is not a contraindication in tight mitrals or even in patients with low ejection fractions. It's a technique of choice, provided you know what you are doing and where the drug is going and what parameters you need to maintain.
Especially the vasodilatation is going to mitigate the fluid overload in conditions like pulmonary, in mitral stenosis. And in regurgitant valvular lesion, again, the vasodilatation will help. So it is definitely recommended.
Yeah, there is one more. Yeah, please carry on, Manokant. Carry on.
The effect of top up on pre-existing epidural for LSCS is patchy, even after adequate local anesthetic dose. Would you give spinal or GA? So that's a good question. They are basically asking about failed spinal.
In fact, I mentioned about this during in an algorithm of hypotension. See, whenever you are giving an epidural for cesarean section, like converting a labor epidural to cesarean, or giving an epidural dose of 20 ml of local anesthetic with bicarboadrenal or fentanyl, what is happening is there is a distension of epidural space and the subarachnoid space gets contracted. And for some reason, if the epidural block is patchy, what do you do now? GA or regional? Well, the choice all depends on the urgency and emergency of cesarean section. If it's a category 1 section, definitely we go for GA. But if it's category 2 or there is a time, then you can always turn the patient and go for spinal. But whenever you're giving spinal, you have to remember two things. The incidence of failed spinal is quite high because the epidural space is distended, subarachnoid space is narrowed, and when you're putting a spinal needle, you may see some fluid coming out, which could be the local anesthetic, and you may mistake it for spinal, and it can be a failed spinal. Second thing that can happen is if you're in the subarachnoid space and you see the CSF coming out, and the dose of spinal, if it is a conventional dose, it can become a high spinal or a total spinal. And if you give a low dose, then it can be it can end up with a lower level block. So all these intricacies, the clinician or the anesthesiologist has to understand before he decides GA or spinal. Again, GA, suppose if the patient is fasting, Mallampati grade 1, not a difficult intubation, then GA is a safe option. So difficult airway, Mallampati grade 4 or grade 3, and patient is not fasting, then regional is a safe bet. So risk versus benefit analysis has to be done for all cases before you decide whether you want to go for GA or regional. But if you're going in for repeat spinal, you have to remember chance of failed spinal, how to mitigate, and high spinal, how to mitigate. You have to keep that in mind. Anything you want to add, others, anybody?
No, you summed it very well, Dr. Sunil.
Yeah, there's somebody wants to show the flow chart of last.
Yeah.
I think if you can explain the different points, madam, the flow chart. Archana, madam.
Yeah, so this is a updated flow chart. You can hear me, right? Yeah, so first thing you have to do is
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, call for help, then get last rescue kit, that is intralipid with IV fluids and some syringes and and whatever you need to give, and then consider cardiopulmonary bypass team. So alert the cardiopulmonary bypass team also, and then start lipid emulsion. So what is the dose? So they have now simplified it by saying 70, above 70 and less than 70. And previously they have noted that there was time waste in they were wasting time in calculating the dosage and then looking for infusion pump and all things like that. So to minimize time, wastage of time there, they have said more than 70, just give bolus of about 100 ml over 2 to 3 minutes. It can be just blind eyeballing it and giving 100 ml, or if you have the pump and things ready, you can give it through a pump. And after that, after 2 to 3 minutes, you can give an additional 250 ml over 15 to 20 minutes. If the patient remains unstable, repeat the bolus or double the infusion. If they are under 70, give about 1.5 ml per kg. Again, that comes to about 50 to 70 ml, say around 70 ml per in 2 to 3 minutes. And you can give half of that in another 15 to 20 minutes. Again, repeat the bolus. So that's about intralipid. Then if the patient has seizures, ensure ABCs, adequate airway, give benzodiazepine and propofol only if benzodiazepine is not quickly available and in a very small dose if you have to give propofol. For arrhythmias or hypotension, so again, use epinephrine and avoid using local anesthetics or beta blockers or calcium channel blockers or vasopressin. So epinephrine, again, you have to use less than 1 mic per kg. That's about 70 to 100, around 70 mic boluses. Then once they are stable, continue lipid emulsion for more than 15 minutes. Maximum dose is about 12 ml per kg. Observe for 2 hours or 4 to 6 hours after cardiovascular instability, or if after cardiac arrest as appropriate. So they have simplified this flow chart and it can be easily and quickly followed in urgent situations.
Dr. Sunil, we'll finish the session, is it?
Any questions, more questions? I think if there are nothing, then we can wind up, yes.
Okay, so with that, we've come to the end of this workshop. We will just take 5 minutes to summarize the key points. So we start out with Dr. Sunil's talk on critical incidents. So the most important take-home points there are in obstetric anesthesia practice, it is uncommon but not unknown. And it's all the more important in parturients because there is a risk of double jeopardy to the mother and fetus. The common problems are related to equipment malfunction, patient-related comorbidities, or problems due to the surgeon-related factors or anesthesiologist-related factors. Inattention, haste, fatigue, failure to follow protocols and adopting shortcuts, lack of knowledge, lack of technical and non-technical skills are some of the reasons. Like a Swiss cheese model, it is basically a series of misses. And it is important to break the chain of events which are leading to a critical incident. So working as a team is very important. And the whole team has to be trained in both technical and non-technical skills. Is there anything else, Dr. Sunil?
Yeah, same thing, yes.
Okay. So moving on to the first case scenario on difficult airway.
One thing which I want to add is all these near misses and critical incidents happen in otherwise healthy parturients and following a low risk procedure. So
the onus is fully on us and the team. And so it is very important to have zero tolerance for such misses. And for every one near miss or critical incident which we see, it is like the tip of the iceberg. We must have missed close to 100 or 1,000. So it's very important to have zero tolerance for all these. Regarding difficult airway scenario, the most important take-home points are, please call for help early. Don't forget apneic oxygenation. Don't forget to modify when you're not able to intubate in terms of the position, the scopes, the stillets and supraglottic devices. Don't get fixated with intubation. Oxygenation is more important. So after 2 attempts at intubation, if you're not able to intubate, please remember to switch over to supraglottic devices for maintaining oxygenation. And if you have a supraglottic device in place, it is okay to proceed with the surgery as long as the surgery is uncomplicated and the supraglottic device is seated properly and is able to provide oxygenation adequately. It is not necessary to always intubate through the supraglottic device. And if at all you have to do it, because the situation is becoming more complex, use it under guidance, under fiber optic guidance, rather than blindly. Dr. Sunil, anything else from that, take home from that scenario?
Yeah, it's same.
Okay.
Fine.
Next is hypotension we had due to high spinal in a patient who also had sepsis. So the important points here are to always remember to prevent hypotension in the beginning itself by looking at left uterine displacement, co-loading, phenylephrine infusions, and then if breathlessness following delivery, that's what we discussed after that. This can be because of a multitude of reasons. It could be because of bronchospasm due to carboprost, blood loss and hypovolemia, embolism, heart failure, sepsis, or high level of anesthesia. We had a big, very nice chart by Dr. Sunil showing all the possible reasons. So it's important to understand that the differentials are wide. We need to treat the patient symptomatically and rule out each of these in a very systematic manner. Similarly, hypotension due to underlying disease. The third scenario was a patient who had cardiomyopathy. So the importance of echo was underlined, and the fact that all hypotension, you shouldn't rush fluids. I mean, that patient had crepitations, and then you have to look at the cardiac problem and then treat it accordingly and not just treat it with IV fluids. This hypotension, second and third scenario, any other take-home points, Dr. Sunil?
Yeah, nothing. More importantly, prevention is better, and have an algorithmic approach. Algorithmic approach is very important.
Algorithmic approach is very important. Then the last scenario was about local anesthetic systemic toxicity. There, the most important take-home points were when you're giving a top-up on the epidural, please treat each dose as a test dose and give it in a graded fashion with aliquots of local anesthetic, or give a test dose. And when it develops in local anesthetic systemic toxicity, do not use propofol, use midazolam. Don't forget intralipid, it's very, very important. Do not use lignocaine for treating arrhythmias, and the dose of adrenaline for the treatment of this is much lesser than a normal cardiac arrest. Dr. Manoka and Dr. Sunil, is that okay for the local anesthetic summing up?
No bupivacaine to be used for converting labor epidural to cesarean.
Except when you want to do a simulation and show local anesthetic toxicity.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed? Okay. Okay, those are the key points. So I'll just highlight what is there for tomorrow and we can close the session then.
Yeah, please.
So before we close, I would like to remind all the delegates that we are starting tomorrow's program at 2 p.m. sharp. We have very, very interesting sessions to start with. The first is the thematic session, Primum Non Nocere, where we are having lectures on lessons learned from saving mothers' lives by Dr. Nuala Lucas. Then we have nerve palsy following delivery under central neuraxial block by Dr. David Bogod. Then we have complications and catastrophes in major obstetric hemorrhage by Dr. Mrinalini Balki. Then we have a journal scan session where we have Dr. Anjan Trika, Dr. Anju Grebal, Dr. Sunanda Gupta, all having very nice talks. Then we have masterclass on airway. We have hypertensive parturient. So it is a fantastic session. I'm really looking forward with a lot of enthusiasm for tomorrow's program. I'm sure the delegates are also interested. So please do log in tomorrow at 2 p.m. sharp. Please do not miss any of these sessions, which have been really nicely charted out in the program. Thank you so much, Dr. Sunil. You can close the session. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you so
very
much.
each one of
Thank
you.
you. I would like to thank all of you, all the faculty, Dr.
Thank
Sunil,
you.
Dr.
Thank
Manoka,
you,
Dr.
everybody.
Lalit, Dr. Akila, Dr. Archana. Thank you all for your participation. And I would like to thank all the delegates and all the faculty for their very interactive session. We had so many questions and answers. I hope you all found it very, very useful. Thank you so much. Looking forward to see all of you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.